Nauset Room. You can access this meeting through Channel 8 or from the town website. Currently in attendance today, we have Susan Carlson, Fran McLennan, Scott Flood, myself, Nancy Wren, and Martha Algier, and Andrea Shaw Reed is our liaison. This is a one agenda item meeting today because we're sort of at an interesting point in our development of affordable housing and all the things we've been working on for the last few years, and I thought it was important for us to sort of take stock and see where we are, and as we get ready for some of these things to come to fruition that we're working on, what we're going to do, our next step. And just as a little bit of a review, the Penrose project on Cape Cod 5 and the Hack project on 107 Main Street are expected to be receiving the final acceptance of their ARPA funds. They've been accepted, but they have to go through some more paperwork. But hopefully by the end of this month, it'll be signed and delivered, and they will have the financing to start putting something in the ground, hopefully, or something, hopefully. I'm, you know, every day it's like we keep our fingers crossed, but I believe we're getting close to those two projects. Our housing needs assessment study is in process. We've had a survey, we've had focus groups. This Thursday, we're having a community forum in which we have another opportunity to hear from the community on what they would like to see in our projects. It's at 6 o'clock at the Snow Library, and we hope we have a good turnout with a wide variety of people who have a wide variety of ideas to share. This process will be completed, our assessment will be completed by November when it's presented to the Select Board, and then in December there'll be some review of it, some more review. So that is in place. So those are things that we've been working on, thinking about, and my feeling is right now, come January, which sounds like a long time because summer's just over, but come January, hopefully the other projects will be underway and the trust is taking care of that, and the assessment will be done and we'll have information. What are we going to do with it? I mean, we want to have a plan today to work on that's going to start today, that we can say how are we going to share this while we're waiting for other things. What do we want to share with the community? We also have to respond. Once we had asked to wait until the housing needs assessment was completed until we responded to the planning board and their updating of the housing section of the comprehensive plan, so that piece is still out there to use what we get from the assessment. Also want to think a little bit more about what we want as a final document for sharing for from the consultants. They are presenting things to us, and we've been going along and looking at their results and seeing and editing and suggesting and doing all those things. But when we're done with this, we want a report. We want updated data, but we also want something that's in hand that we can use to spread the word. And I think it's really important that we think about a little bit what we would like to see as well as how they will present it. So that's another piece. And then my third part of this discussion today is what can we do in the meantime? Because I believe that we've been waiting and working, and we're waiting for legislation for the trust. We're waiting for so many things, and we keep going forward. But the other thing, what short-term things can we look at and maybe make some efforts with the trust to put some smaller projects into the mix? And that's all.
That's a great summary.
So
And a daunting list.
It is, and after I wrote it down, I thought, okay, except that, you know, I have pages from, we've talked a lot about this in the past, and we've come up with ideas, and we say, might do this, we might do that. So we have notes about this and things we've talked about, and so basically it's an action plan. I want us to pick it, you know, we may not get to do them all, but I would like us to do some of them, and at least to know that we're moving in the right direction. And I tried to, I brought some things if you have trouble remembering, which I doubt, but also I tried to see if, for the discussion period, if maybe we could do it this way. I don't even know if this is, let's try this. What we want to know more about specifically. What can we do with what we have at the end of the year, where we are come December? And what do we want to work on in collaboration with the trust? So I thought maybe if we separate it like that, it would give us some kind of an idea of where we're going. Oh, excuse me, I left out one other important thing that's going in the process is the RFP for Governor Prince has been sent out, and we're hoping for some results by November, correct?
But that's when we get proposals in.
Not result.
It's a
I
long
still
way
want a
from then having
result.
a developer.
No, but we get proposals in November, so that piece is also going to be in process at this period of time. So it's not for lack of trying that we have things out there, but obviously completion is a goal we all have.
Can you say those three questions
Yes.
again?
What we want to know more about, what can we do with what we have by the end of the year, and what should we work on in collaboration with the trust? So, we don't have to answer all of these today, but I wanted to make a stab at it because our next meeting is a joint meeting in October with the trust with the consultants, and our November meeting is also a joint meeting with the trust and the consultants. So this happened to be a free meeting that I think we can at least get a good start on it. So, do you want to do those by sections maybe, and see if that helps us clarify what we want to do?
Sure.
Okay. All right. All right. Do I want to do that? I don't even know what
Do
to
you want to start with the study,
That's what can we do with what we have by the end of the year? Let's do that one first. So what can we do with this once when it's done? It was a request that we have up-to-date data. We're not being super surprised by the data. It's pretty much reinforcing what we knew before and also saying that the problem has intensified and we need more housing probably. So that's going to, but to me, that's not the result that I want to use. I mean, I want to use it, but people know that already. So what are we going to do with the rest of it and with the housing stock goals and with process going forward and what we can use? So I don't know what we're thinking about with, anybody want to jump in? I'll be glad to.
Jump in.
Sure.
And looking at the minutes from the August 1st meeting, I was thinking about those different goals that kind of came out of that session with Golds and Consulting. So one of the things I'm thinking is, with the information that we have by the end of the year, can we start to set some priorities? For example, look at investigate housing needs to support families with children. If we kind of, would it be helpful to prioritize certain goals, particularly ones that maybe aren't being addressed necessarily through these big projects? I don't know, that's just one idea, sort of.
They're going to come out with goals and objectives and action plan, and but I think we need to look at it and decide what we want to do first. I mean, it's going to go through the trust as well and the select board, but I think that's, families with children seems to be a real issue that we need to deal with.
the complete study will be posted and shared on the website, right?
Yes.
So then the issue becomes how do we cherry pick from that or take sections of it that we can then
Right.
disseminate further through whatever various means we devise, right?
Right.
So a part of it would be, I mean, how do we use the public media that we have? And, rather than just send them the information or do some kind of a press release on it, maybe we should have a media day. I mean, where it's Exit 89 and the Chronicle, and pick your other media vehicles, even some local radio, and kind of just have a presentation of the information, which is going to be new to a lot of people, and then field questions from that or engage in some, community relations with that, and with the hope that from there, the issues and the word and the solutions, if we will, that may be, near term are developing will get disseminated more fully and get more people at least aware of what's going on.
Okay.
But I have a question within that is, forgive me for not being that familiar with everything that's in there now, but is there any new information? Of course there is, but are there any learnings or observations or discoveries from this study that are surprising or new or such that we see the further acceleration, if you will, of the problem?
Can we answer
Are
that
there
at this
surprises?
moment? I don't know if I can answer that completely.
I would say there's nothing surprising per se. There is acceleration. There's certain areas that have become more urgent or more obvious. I think overall it's the same picture. And, it's the same dilemma we have in terms of the number of units, the financial accessibility issues. But if there's anything, well, part of it is we haven't gotten to the 10-year production goals yet, because that takes the need and tries to put some priorities around it, as well as realities of not only need, but what we can do. And this doesn't deal with resources, which is a whole nother area in terms of we'll never have enough resources, but it's definitely the case we don't now have enough resources. So I think you can sort of, assume the same kinds of needs before. I think there's a little bit more emphasis on families and workforce, but I don't think we ever neglected that. I do think we have to then weigh it because there's a lot of emphasis on workforce needs. However, we haven't solved the problem of seniors with very low incomes and who are a cost burden. So the whole issue, one thing I am disappointed thus far is that we haven't gotten more or better idea on the nature of the homeowner needs. Because supposedly there are hundreds of homeowner households that are cost burden, but we really don't know how. Is it because they can't afford the taxes, they can't afford to upgrade that unit, all this kind of stuff. So I think we need a little bit more work on that. So I think we can assume the same needs. So the question is, what do you want to do with them?
Yeah, that's,
To your point about the seniors that are cost burden, is there, if we don't get enough data points on that through this study, is there an addendum study that we can do or some way of drilling down further on that problem? Might not be through Goldson, but it might be through other avenues that, if it's a blind spot for us.
one of the things we talked about is just doing a better job and help some of the organizations that are helping people, getting that word out, like HESH and different places like that, that have things that the trust is actually supporting them, and how we get that word out and how we help people who would need help, but don't necessarily want to go out and ask for help,
Right.
and finding out if there's some other ways that we can address that. So that is probably an ancillary thing that we will, we could find more, that could be under what we find out more about is homeowner needs, if we don't get enough of this.
So I'm trying to figure out, is there a way to identify these households or who these people are individually, if you will, without their raising their hands? Are there any tells or anything that we can use so that possibly, like you said, people are certainly hesitant to ask for the kind of, they might not know of it, but they're also hesitant to ask for the kind of assistance that may be available. So if we could identify them in some way or get a better handle on whom they might be, then I know this sounds a bit naive, but maybe we can approach them.
Okay.
It might be helpful to find out
Feasible?
how the statistic about how did they figure out the percentage of homes
Right.
with seniors? I mean, it's an astonishing 27% or something like that of residents in our town that have a single senior person living in them. That's,
Right.
to me, extraordinary. But how do they come up with that? How did they figure that out?
Be from the census?
It's from the decennial census and the American Community Survey, which is done each year. But the thing is, it's compiled on a level that is hard then to drill down deep, because there's,
Granularity.
confidentiality, so,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's a key question, how do we figure out? in
Right.
This is a
drilling down?
This is basically a brainstorming session today. We don't have to solve every
Right,
single
right,
problem
right,
today.
yeah.
What we're trying to
Good.
do. That's-
We can ask the questions and
We can
not
ask the
listen.
questions, we can sort of put it into groups, and I'm going to just back up. I'm going to give Elizabeth a little heads up on what we did. You missed my overly great summary that said where we are today, but we're at a point right now is waiting for things to happen. Hopefully some of our projects are going to start this fall. This survey is going to be done. But the purpose of this is in January, what are we going to do? What are we going to act? Because we've been waiting and doing some things. I need some action. Thanks.
I'd really like to see if we can have a conversation with some proposals to put forth on our warrant. We talk about some of the things that other towns are doing, and I know that we aren't the money, the trust, but I think having a conversation about what sort of positive programs are happening around in other communities and things that we could go to the voters with and, go to the select board and ask for sponsorship with. For me, I know personally it's very difficult to sort of get any sort of assistance through programs because, Bailey Boyd doesn't go to Orleans. So there's a huge housing rehab program that some of the Outer Cape towns do that Orleans residents don't have access to. That's a little bit different than the one that we currently have. So there, things like that. Some of the communities have rental assistant programs that when you get into it, they do have a formula of how that helps. So if you're in a rental, for example, that's a market rate rental, there is a way that you can do an application process, and different towns have those. So I think Wellfleet has one, Eastham has one, Chatham has one. I'm not sure if we have one. I know we discussed that we did have one during COVID. So I just think for me, January is usually what I look at as like a brainstorming, sort of getting support and ideas of what we could do to go before the voters and how we would address to go before the voters. And I know that we've been looking at some, very large major projects, but I think that to look at, would we as a town consider the down payment program that Wellfleet and Provincetown do? As a community, would we consider having an allocation to the trust that would allow people to apply and get, rental assistance, and they could know that, hey, you have a rental with, Fred Jones, and Fred Jones wants you to pay $1,800 and you're able to afford $1,200, and so can the trust commit to paying that difference to the homeowner? So that's kind of things that I think we should be talking about and supporting and looking at, and I know Andrea is getting up to the mic. But for me, I think that, we do talk a lot about the big picture, but I think there are policies and ways that we could also help support, through the transitional period of these projects. And so I think that would be a good discussion.
And also, the other point I made, we want some short-term objectives, things like that, or short-term projects that we can use as that fill-in piece. And I had divided this into 3 sections for our notes today. One was what to work on in collaboration with the trust, which I think that would be under that title, would you say?
I think so. I think, my experience has been, in Provincetown, it was the Select Board, the Community Housing Committee, the Year-Round Market Rate Rental Housing Trust, which is essentially similar to the Affordable Housing Trust that we have. And then we also brought in the Affordable Housing Executive Director. I think there was about 4 committees that would come together, and that would be specifically more towards, basically deciding as a group what actionable items we would be presenting to the town through the town meeting vote. And that was one type of workshop that we did. And another type of workshop that they have done is, looking at bylaws and things like that. And so that was with planning, zoning, and also included the affordable housing committees, community housing and things like that, because it is a massive collaborative effort. And so I do realize that's a lot of people in the room. But when you have a singular focus such as housing, it sort of helps to have this, workshop style conversation, where you're brainstorming and kind of doing like a think tank type of thing. And then sort of in those meetings, looking at, okay, would this be feasible? If it's not feasible, and looking at that. And, Provincetown has been really very forward-thinking and sort of the way that they're addressing housing and trying to look at it from all angles. And so, I feel very strongly that, while Provincetown is having the conversations, we can look at that and realize we are in the same boat. And I know a lot of people think we're not, but I think we truly are. I think that if we don't have that same sort of pressure on us that other towns are having, I think we're really not doing our residents a service that we should be doing. And so that would be my thing, is I think that, come October, November, having discussions about trying to get some of these things together and then working together as a think group to, go before the voters, because the voters ultimately are the ones who make that decision.
Just,
Andrea?
oh,
Oh, I just wanted to add to your brainstorming. I think it's fabulous. But as you talk about your messaging to the public, coordinating like we did last year before the Springtown meeting, we had groups in the room working together on warrants. But would you consider also not just updating the public that things are worse, but having the conversations you need to have?
That was not my goal.
Right, no, but it could force a conversation with your other, with the other boards and committees about how we as residents can make it better. And so if you have programs that say, here's the information if you need rental assistance, here's if you'd like to donate to a specific effort ongoing in the trust, here is what you can do at town meeting, so that if Scott's suggestion is one that you take and you do a press day, you've now changed your message to empower people to make the problem, smaller.
Well, that's exactly where I want to be.
Great.
I mean, I think we've done our analysis, we've done the projects, but I think this is where we are at this point. And whatever we can do to make that clear is important, and what we can also, spread the word about that. The other two topics that we're trying to do are, what can we do with what we've learned, which is what we're talking about now, and what do we want to know more about? So we're trying to sort of divide them in those three.
can I just
I'll let you go next.
tag on to what you were saying, Elizabeth, that I think one of the things that might be great to do in kind of this interim period is make sure all of us have the same knowledge base when it comes to things like rental assistance programs. Because some of you may know a lot about what's happening, and some of us may know very little. So whether that's a presentation from someone from one of these towns, or one of us sort of takes ownership of really researching and talking and then making a presentation about it, so that we all have the same knowledge base, as you do, for instance, Elizabeth, about Provincetown. Because we're not, I don't know, at least I speak for myself. I
think, I think with Provincetown, it's, I would say Provincetown and Nantucket, on what I would say Cape and Islands, are definitely, I think this is their number one goal with everything. So it's very consuming. And when I left the board and took on the town clerk position, I will admit I have not been in the seat that I used to be, where I would witness the conversations happening as much. But it's still, a very prominent subject. And like I said, when we're doing workshops, it's really because the select board in Provincetown has decided this is their number one goal above everything else. And so a lot of every single meeting, we're having a special town meeting just to deal with the accusation, I can't even talk right now, to acquire. We're having a special town meeting to acquire land for housing. I mean, that is their driving force right now with everything. And I'm not saying Orleans has to do that, because I do think it's consuming, and I do think that there are other things that, are focused. But what I'm saying is, I think by looking at some of these other communities like Nantucket and Provincetown, and just really briefly looking through what they're discussing, it gives you a very great idea of the numbers, the needs, the things that they want to do, because they have invested a lot of, of their efforts. We're currently doing a Donahue Institute. We actually had the institute that is doing the Goldstein do our housing, and I think that even though theirs might be a little bit higher of number, I think the need is probably just as high right now on the Cape everywhere. The cost of everything has just really skyrocketed. Groceries, cost of living, I think about the cost of a window replacement. You could do it, you used to be able to do it for $1,200, now it's $2,600. So just everything, I mean, we talk about seniors who need, housing costs, and I think just in general, there's so much that it's sort of happening all at once in the last 5 years, it's hard for us to keep up. And we can do all the studies we want, but, it's just gonna.
The point is to see, what we can actually do to help people and to help the situation. I think I'll step right in this right now, because Orleans has a lot of priorities right now, and I don't know, I take that back. Orleans has a lot of wishes and desires right now. The select board goals are large, with many things on them, but a sense of priority is not really clear to the average citizen, which I'll call myself right now. And I think that's something, I mean, personally, our priority is housing and jobs, because those are the things that keep the town going. But that's not necessarily a focus of the whole town, and I think that's part of going back to your idea of bringing some boards together and starting this discussion again, because everybody wants everything, and I understand it, but I also understand that without housing, a lot of those other things aren't probably going to be sustainable. But that's just my opinion, speaking for the group.
One thing that might help, because the problem is so large, is to break it into pieces. Rather than we're trying to get our arms around this, it's like boiling the ocean. I mean, we're trying to get our arms around this big problem. It may make sense to break it into smaller pieces, and then to develop, whether it's task force or individuals that are against it, but say, okay, what can we do about X? And it could be, let's use the example we were discussing earlier, seniors in living alone, right, in homes. Okay, that's a problem, or it's an opportunity for both the seniors and possibly for potential renters, if we could create some kind of incentive-based program that would say to seniors, hey, you're living in I'm making this up, so excuse me, but a 3,000 square foot home with 3 bedrooms by yourself, what kind of incentives could we put together to make it attractive for them to think about bringing in a residence that addresses loneliness issues and income issues and other things that might be helpful. But if we don't have a program around it, we identify the problem, but not bring it through to what we can do about it. And I'm just using that as an example of one of the buckets. And then there's another bucket here, another
Let's
bucket
take that,
there.
what you're saying, and so let's just do a couple more. So seniors,
Well, let me just say, you are going to have that.
We are.
At some point, you will have a housing production plan, and that's not just building new rental housing.
Yeah.
That could be rehabbing, that could be serving this group. So part of what you're going through now will produce that plan. The question then is how you
Well, the
make it
plan is
real.
one thing. Well, we have to actualize it.
Right, but, so that's what I'm
Plans are
saying.
great.
You don't have to come out with that plan, because that will come out of this process. And it will be broken into sections and pieces and
Okay.
categories.
Okay.
The question is, what do you do about it?
all right.
Well,
So
that's what I'm
Yeah.
getting at, is kind of like
Yeah.
breaking them separately and saying, okay, what do we specifically do about something? Because you know, we have lots of housing, lots, but a fair amount of housing that's coming on stream in 3 to 4 or however many years. But there's this period of time in between where
We're losing,
you need shorter-term individual solutions that can begin to close the gap, because, you know, this problem is not waiting for 62 units to come on board. And so
exactly.
I mean, I think the biggest problem is that it's just, there's not availability. I think it's going beyond affordability.
Okay.
Because, you know, I have friends who do quite well, and they were getting outbid on houses that we're buying, so then they had to bid really high, and then they take the risk of a bank saying, we're not gonna give you a loan. So then, you know, they can afford it, they have a great job, but then it was like competing with the cash flow that other
Right.
people were coming in with. And then also it was, well, my rental's up, I can, you know, I see it all the time, I'm on the Cape Cod rental page, and so you'll see rentals from everywhere from Falmouth down. And they'll be like, we're a couple, we've got no kids, we can afford $2,000 a month. There's nothing
Right.
for them to go into, and their range is from, you know, sometimes it's crazy. They, you know, they're like, well, you know, a lot of times it's from Orleans up to Falmouth. But for me, that's a very large range. And to have 3 units, or, you know what I mean? Like, so basically how I look at it is, you know, I don't look at, you know, I can understand, I can figure out ways to helping people stay in their home, if that's what it is, because I understand someone who's been in their home for a long time, you know, even if they sell their home, they're now going to have a cash value that doesn't allow them to go into affordable rental, because there are caps. So that, for me, it doesn't, logically, I look at it like, what I'm looking at is how do we have rentals, and what do we incentivize the homeowners who have homes that incentivize them to rent to year-round people versus, you know, the summer rentals, because the reality is these people are buying them as a business, and they need to make a profit in order to sustain their business. And so how, as a town and as a community, can we look at these businesses and say, what are we going to incentivize you? And what incentivizes them is money. So it comes down to money. And I'm not trying to be, you know, whatever, but that is the reality, is it comes down to, you've made an investment. If I made an investment in a second home, and unless I have some other form of income that's going to supply, you know, the ability for me to maintain this house, I'm going to have money to have that house, that business. And unless the town is going to give me an incentive in money to rent to a year-round tenant,
Well, that's
I'm
what I
gonna,
mean.
so with a rental, that's what I'm saying, for me, I look at like rental assistance, right? If I know that I need to rent out the house at an X amount of dollars, and the tenant coming in can only do another amount, there's a gap that as a town, if we had a way or a fund or something that could help fill it, that might incentivize them, because they know, I guess I just look at it like, there is a human side of it, and I understand it, and I moved 4 times during my pregnancy. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it was very difficult for me to find a rental. And so during my pregnancy, I actually ended up moving 4 times until I was able to get into a stable house. So it's the availability. It's gone beyond the affordability. It's
Oh,
the
absolutely.
availability. And even if we build all these houses, Scott, there's still a lot of people
I'm
that.
not talking about building, I'm talking about
Yeah.
the unused capacity that we have.
Yeah.
By way of example, because I hear what you're saying. In my small neighborhood, there are 4 or 5, with a 5th I'm not sure about, homes that are vacant all year long. There's nobody in there. There's nobody even in there renting during the summer. These are properties that, they're nice homes, and they sit vacant. They're maintained, you know, the lawns are, everything's taken care of, but they're empty. And it's like, okay, I think I probably understand to a certain degree the owner's perspective about why that's the case or what their issues might be. But is there something that we can do that you know, incentives and other things that can help open up some of the what I'll just call, poorly utilized capacity that exists in town, and can we go and identify, such unused or underutilized capacity in the town and say, come up with some declaration, if you will. If we said I'm making this up, there are 50 homes in Orleans that are vacant for the most part year-round, easily habitable by renters or owners. They're not going to sell, or obviously they would. Is there an incentive that we can create? A combination of things. Money always helps, tax, this, that, and the other thing, but are there incentives that we could create that might make it, the owners amenable to something else?
I think the best way to find out would be to ask them, because,
We need the mechanism to identify them,
yeah,
and then we need the structure, if you will, the plan to figure out what might we use. But it starts with talking to owners and understanding what, if anything, might incentivize them, and then seeing if, because it might be that, oh, this is a lovely idea, but it's impractical because you have an entrenched mindset that says, I'm not going to do anything. But if we talk to them and understand their issues and what some of the barriers might be, we may, emphasis on may, be able to create something that would be valuable to them and help with the problem.
do we have an active part-time homeowners association? Do we have one in Orleans?
Townwide?
Yeah, well, I know I keep referencing Provincetown, but Provincetown is a very active one. And I know that in the past, members would go and actually speak at their meetings, because what you're essentially talking about is the part-time resident and, going to them and having conversations with them. And how do we get them to, respond, to our inquiries?
You're referencing P-Town. Do you think that any of the people whom you obviously know that are doing this work would be willing to sit down and speak with us? It doesn't have to be formally in a public forum, but if we were to say, let's form a committee of 3, and then we're going to sit down and talk to the people that are doing what we're doing in other towns, more or less successfully, but at least engage in that conversation, so
So,
we
Marcia,
don't
do you?
know,
Sorry.
I mean, we do have the peer
So
group.
I was going to say, is
Yeah.
a lot of them already do, and a lot of the people, for example, like Michelle Jarosevich, she is our housing coordinator. I'm assuming Marcia might.
I've talked to her.
Yeah, and
She's
so,
very experienced.
so a lot of it,
It's not for lack of ideas, it's
Right.
tons of ideas.
Yeah,
The question is
it's,
what to do with them.
it's what to do with it, and then it's also, I think even in Provincetown, it comes down to, well, in Provincetown, the biggest difference is land resource. They have the drive, they have the willingness of the voter to vote for the money. It's the land. We don't have the space in Provincetown or the capacity. So, for example, we just went out to an RFP, and the old police station, because we're building a new police station, has a plot of land. They've already approved 4-story housing. And Jerome Smith, we purchased, we gave them the land that they combined with another, the developer combined with another plot of land, and then we also gave them additional $3 million. So Provincetown has recognized that it's funding. I mean, Harbor Hill was $12 million for 27 units. They've gone to the voter, and the voter has consistently come out and financially supported the housing development for Provincetown. It's coming up with creative ways to redevelop when they're doing, the condos, and how do we make sure that if they're putting in 6 condos, 2 are affordable. It's land. That's the issue in Provincetown, is the
We have a lot
land.
of things in place for this to happen, but the question is, how do we bring who together to talk about how we move to the next level? I guess that's,
Nancy, can I comment on that?
Certainly.
Because we made inroads on this discussion before, and we never finished it. One of the immediate population is people who are here year-round and have their own investment properties. So they don't need to get into their house 2 weeks a year or a month a year, but they do have properties, and Jamie Ballarat is one of those people who I asked. I said, Jamie, what would it take to take the 2 rentals, and he knows because he hasn't followed up with me, 2 rental units that you have, and tell me the difference between what you can make as a short-term rental and what you can make as a year-round rental. And those are the kind of discrete interviews that you could do in this town. We know a lot of, not a lot, but we can begin to inquire, and you can build the data you need that way to then create a program, if it's feasible, with the trust, to say, and start to build from success. You're not going to be encroaching on the right of a private owner who wants to keep their capacity to vacation. You're going to start with somebody who already lives here year-round, has additional properties, and you could maybe incentivize through tax or rental assistance that those become year-round rentals. And I think that that's very doable, and it starts one conversation at a time.
And Provincetown just voted to do the tax deferment for 35%,
But
which is,
Provincetown is 80%
right, well, this is what I'm trying to say. It's a
We're
very,
different community.
it's a very different, yeah.
And
So-
again, let's shift the focus. You're not gonna have to, you don't have to figure out the problem.
No, we've
Because-
got a firm
But the
grasp.
question is, once this, and I wouldn't prejudge what this plan looks like. We still have a lot of work to get to the plan. But let's assume you have a plan that lays out the need, lays out categories of need, lays out goals and strategies, lays it all out. I think the issue, especially for this committee, because you're in charge of or responsible for community engagement, how do you engage the community in whatever that plan says? You don't have to know what that plan says, or I wouldn't prejudge what that plan would say. So how do you engage the community? So I think that's the challenge here, because until you get the plan, you can't figure out whether this program is better than that program, and who do you talk to about how you do it, and what are the admins, and what I'm always concerned about, what are the admin costs of setting up a program, because there are always admin costs, et cetera. So let's put aside that so much as, how do you talk to community about it? And I think warrant articles are one way that conversation happens, but you need to then organize whatever it is this plan comes out with. Is there going to be a next step for talking to the community?
The question is, I agree with everything you just said, and that's exactly our main focus. But I guess where I am right now is, once we have explained it, once we have talked about it, where do we push? Where do we push? Where is the thing that says, yes, this is a great idea, but
I think
how are we
it-
going to implement it? And I think we've been there a few times and we've got that going, but I think we can't let up on it, and I think we have to continue to figure out where's the leverage. We don't have a lot of leverage as a committee, but there is leverage in the town, and I think there are, things that we have to, I don't know, I've just been listening to this for a while, and I feel that if this is the time for us to say, okay, this is something we really need because it came out of the study, this is something we really believe in, who do we get to make this happen?
I think it's town meeting vote. I think it's the town meeting vote.
But before that ever gets to that, it
Well, you
has
have
be
to,
sent
like, come up
to-
with
to the
an
warrant.
article, and you present it to the select board.
Well, yes,
mean,
but that's important. I mean, we have, those are steps that they don't just come automatically. We have to decide what we want to push for. So I think and we've done it in the past. I mean, obviously, things are moving. So I think, it's just a question of taking the study and going the next step. Fran?
I'm sort of looking at it from maybe a larger perspective and thinking about what we've already done. And what we've already done is we have created one large affordable housing development for people who qualify, and then we have created a middle-sized housing development at 107 Main. And now we have on the street an RFP that we hope will get respondents for developing another large affordable housing development at the Governor Prince site, and probably a mixed housing event development there. And in the past, we tried several other smaller things that can happen more quickly. For example, we bought a condo on Old Colony Way and have rented it as an affordable unit. And we did a Habitat house. So I'm wondering about where, from another point of view, we haven't really had the conversation about, do we want to have larger projects, middle-sized projects, or small projects? And the larger projects, we know, are complicated and take a long time and serve the population we want to serve. The middle-sized projects are more expensive, and the smaller projects are even more expensive than that. But nonetheless, do we want to put some emphasis into trying to do things that are smaller and quicker, and that will answer some of these questions that we're raising today? I would like to see us evaluate the things we've done in the past. How much did they cost if we were to try them again? How much would they cost now? And do we have the resources and the ability to actually create some smaller projects that answer to some of these needs?
I totally support what you're saying, Fran. One of the things that jumped out to me with this report was sort of a question around linking two things. For example, seniors in homes with like 4 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms with 1 senior, and cost burdened. Then we have young families hard pressed to find a place to rent or buy. You know, is there room, or is there a way to look at both things so that maybe we're looking at more short-term prefab housing in a senior community if we had the land somewhere, which would open up a house that could be a home for a small family, and how could we support maybe through rental assistance programs? I don't know that when things pop up in the report, if there are ways to link them and try and look at some shorter-term solutions. Of course, it's always the money that I stumble over in terms of how do you do this financially, and what's legal and what's not and what's feasible. But just big ideas in terms of things that jumped out of the report to me. I think that, you know, I keep thinking about that data in the report that was shared that talked about how the numbers of children in the elementary schools dropped by 50% since the late 90s. And it's just stunning to me and sad. It really was sad reading that. And how do, you know, I think most people in town don't know that. And I think it would be kind of shocking, and it says a lot about what our community is going to look like. And, you know, I feel sad when people leave after the summer, because I like having young children around and families and laughter. And, you know, it really can change a community to lose the families.
My son is always shocked when I tell him I had 362 kids in my 8th grade class. He has 120. So it's not even the building space, we have it. And she was my preschool teacher.
Oh, really?
So, you know, it's a very different demographic that exists right now. And, you know, so one of the things I think that, you know, we talk a lot about keeping seniors in the home, and I think about, well, who's providing the services that allow them to stay in the homes? You know, how many police officers, how many, you know, paramedics, firemen do we need? You know, what are we talking about services even to provide for the tourism that comes here when we're talking about buildings and grounds, different facilities that we're potentially building? You know, do we have the staffing need? And if we don't have the staffing need, what is preventing us from getting the staffing need? And what is the age of the people that we generally are trying to attract? And if we are on a steady 2% decline of enrollment at the school, that that is showing no signs of slowing down, you know, it's not just, then what's going to happen is as the schools get smaller and, you know, things become affected, we're not going to attract people to live here, to raise their families here, because it's not even going to be sustainable or obtainable. And then the people that are coming here, they're working in a manner that is not going to be our DPW, you know, or our police and fire, or, you know, it might be, but, you know, it's a trickle effect that has been happening from the late 90s to now. It has been problematic, and, you know, I do feel like, in a sense, we are just attempting to put tape on a broken dam and really just trying to poke a lot of holes, which is hard. And it's, you know, I've lived in other places, but this has been my home my entire life. And I would say about 10% of my class is still here, and the rest of them are living elsewhere and raising their children elsewhere. And I don't see that them coming in. You know, we talk about during COVID, oh, we had a 10% raise. That was one child, because our 10% of the classroom size now is so small. When I was growing up, I had 10% of my class was my first cousins, so there was 5 of us. It's just a different, it's very different.
Nancy?
This is a little bit, I don't want to go down the depressing road here.
It is a depressing conversation, but
And I
I
think,
wanted to go back to one of the questions you asked at the very beginning and follow up on something
Thank
Liz
you.
said. What do we want to know that we don't? You had asked. And one of the things I would like to know is, from the business community and the municipality, I'd like to know the business needs for staff. How many staff do they have? How many staff do they need? And what are the salaries that those staff would make or do make? I'd like to know that from the businesses in the town, and I'd like to know it from our municipality, from our town employees.
well,
Because then we can have more of a grasp on what are the working people needs in the town that we might want to try to help.
I guess the question, we have an economic development committee that's doing, which I haven't heard much about or know what their goals are, but that seems to me to be a place that the marriage of this and that is, I don't understand why we aren't working together, frankly, because I think the two things definitely go together, but I also haven't heard a lot about how that's working out. So but that would be a good question to ask them, to find, I would assume, right?
The Economic Development Committee is meeting for the first time next week. So
Okay.
that's why you haven't
why I haven't
partnered
heard
with them,
anything
right?
Okay.
But also, Fran, what you were just talking about, the beginning of that information, you know, the Economic Development Plan came from a large study, and some of the questions or statistics you're after are in that. We know what the average salary here, we know some of the business challenges. So it would be more like what you've been talking about, what isn't in the plan that you'd like to, or in the study, that you want to drill down further. And that would be a great conversation with the Economic Development
Sure.
Committee. And I'm the liaison to that committee, so I can help facilitate
I
that.
think it'd be,
But also the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, let's face it, they're the ones that, I mean, whether they're doing this work or not is immaterial. They're the ones that know it's their constituency, they're the businesses, and rather than try to do everything ourselves,
Yes.
trying to bring other bodies, organizations, or groups that have a vested interest in solving this would be really helpful. I mean, I understand, but only anecdotally, that there are several business owners in town who have taken some pretty serious steps to provide additional housing for their workers.
Right.
What can we learn from that?
And Scott, the chamber is part of the economic development group, so we have access. As soon as you start talking, you know, if you can formulate questions, we can take them and get the answers. So, but the other resource is the Cape Cod Chamber, because remember, we have this issue that not all businesses in Orleans report to or communicate with the chamber, only members. So I think it behooves us to make sure the conversation is broad and that we've got data to back
Right.
up.
Well, doing that also is also an incentive for businesses that are outside the chamber
Yes.
community to join the chamber community. The reason they don't, as far as I understand, be a part of the chamber community is because they see no value. It's like, oh, honestly, I mean, it's like, why aren't you a part of the Orleans Chamber of Commerce? And the response is, I don't see any value to being a part of it. So we can help them create, I mean, a very small area, but help them create value, which
If
these
there
things
were
start to
goals, I mean,
kind of
your
come
housing
together.
study isn't really to grow membership for the chamber, right? So,
No,
but
of
if
course
there were
not.
goals, if there was a shared goals or an inventive program
Right.
that engaged the chamber, that was originated in your vision, that's something that, you know, you can create a new partnership about, or a new action plan on a very specific
Okay.
goal. But the Economic Development Group is just getting going, but the
Okay.
study has some of the questions that.
And that's on the
raised.
website?
I believe it's in the planning board. The planning board was the
So it might
committee, the
be-
board that housed the study.
Study,
And it
okay.
is on the planning board webpage, I
Okay,
believe.
we can take a look at that, and I will not say we need to work with them, because now it's time to start working with them, but I would like to think that these two things go hand in hand. When we did the survey, the largest percentage of reasons when people were coming to the Cape was for nature, for the beaches and the nature. That was the biggest group, and then it went way down for jobs. People come here for a job. If they're going to retire, they're going to come here for nature. But if they're going to come here for other reasons, for jobs, and the job requires a home, and I don't know who's coming here for jobs, apparently. I mean, that's,
No jobs.
so,
Nancy, can I just add one other thing, because you were referring to select board goals, and it was, they're not ranked, they're not prioritized.
Yes.
But I think that the select board is deeply committed that wastewater continue, that our investment in wastewater continue, and our investment in housing continue, that these are fundamental, because we don't solve the economic development without addressing both of these things. So I just want to reassure this board that the select board understands the priority of those two. And without those two, we don't get to economic development.
okay. I'll write that down. Well, I think our brains are working. I think we've been trying hard. You know, it's a little premature in terms of where we are, but I thought it was important for us to at least start thinking about this. Did you want to, are you stretching it? Would you like to say something?
I wasn't going to, but I think I will.
We would love to have someone come and speak to
For
us.
a reason.
Hello, my name is
Identify yourself.
Joanne Amaru, South Orleans. Liz brought up the point that Elizabeth brought up the point that so many people who have grown up here cannot afford to live here. 1 in 10, that's a high number as far as I'm concerned, because most of my kids' friends have left. They can't afford it. I have 6 grandchildren, and my daughter and son-in-law live off Monument Road. They're taking their kids actively all over the United States, looking at other places they might want to live when they get out of school, because they won't be able to live here. But my son's 3 boys are fishing. They work on a fishing boat in Chatham. Their father's a fisherman, their grandfather's a fisherman. That's what they want to do. They want to fish. How in the world are they going to afford it? I mean, it's crazy. My eldest grandson is 23, and he's been socking money away for 5 years now, and he thinks he's got an enormous amount of money, but the market is outpacing him faster than he can save money. So we currently have 1 grandson living with us, and another one will be in our rental house for the winter, and then we rent it for the summer, and he comes and lives with us again. So I think that one of the things that we have to think about for the town is there are a lot of families like ours whose children have grown up here who want to help their children. One of the things that very little is known about, at least by everybody I talk to, is accessory dwelling units or granny pods, whatever you want to call them. I think that to have some kind of a presentation on what the town will allow, how to get going on that, and is there any kind of assistance available if you wanted to build an ADU on your property? Because I know you have to put a septic system in, and that is monstrous. Then you have the conflict of, well, gee, we're going to have a sewers in a couple of years, and am I going to spend $30,000 on a septic system when I'm getting a sewer in a couple of years? You know, that pushes you back again. So the other thing that we're fighting with our diminishing numbers in the schools is that the people who come here have a lot of money, and they don't really want people living in their houses when they're not here. At least all the people that I know in our neighborhoods, they like to be able to come down for the weekend or come down for the Christmas vacation. They can't do that if somebody's living in their house. But they might be amenable to having an ADU on the property. You know, that would give them kind of a guardian for their property when they're not there, too. So it might be a win-win situation. We're in a tough bind because I just read somewhere that